Hello, this is Brad Wild, and today I'm going to take on the challenge of doing some pattern work, some touch and goes. Not easy to do in X-Plane, or maybe any simulator, because you just don't have the ability to quickly turn around and look out the window and see where you are in relationship to the runway or the airport. So I've come up with a couple of tricks to help me do this. But anyone who's actually learned how to fly real airplanes has been through many grueling hours of pattern work getting those landings and takeoffs down. Today I'm going to be flying the Bonanza F33 from Carenado. I really like this airplane. Very stable, easy to fly, whips right along. The only downside is it still has a Garmin. So where are we going to be doing this? Well, in the upper northwest corner of Oregon, in Astoria, flying around Astoria Regional, which is Kilo Alpha Sierra Tango. It's a small uncontrolled airport, meaning no tower. And we're going to be flying using runway 8. And I'm just checking the traffic pattern, and all I have is left for 26, so I'm assuming left for 8 as well. So let's hop in the airplane and try this out. So let's close up our luggage door, climb in the airplane, and shut our door here. Just going to be you and me today. And I won't go through great pains starting the airplane up, but I will try to use best practices and leave your comments below if I miss something. So, battery on, beacon and nav lights, fuel on, mixture rich, throttle full, and I'll show you why in 1 second. I need my fuel flow gauge on, and I'm going to turn on the fuel pump, and I have fuel flow. So this is kind of priming the pump. Once that's done, just crack the throttle 1/4 inch. And then out the window, clear. Make sure no one's around. Magnetos both. And I've got about 1200 RPM, which is great. Close that. Alternator on. Taxi light on. Like some post lights turned on, a little late in the afternoon, and now we can taxi out to our runway. Again, these are just touch and goes in the pattern, and I do this as a challenge. It's a lot easier to do it in real airplane. Well, I'll spare you the taxi. Join me in a minute. All right, I'm going to turn my nose to the wind for my run-up. So RPM to 1700. Just check the magnetos. We don't want to see a huge drop, more than 100 RPM. That looks good. So back to both, and then cycle my prop back to a fine pitch, and back on the throttle. Alright, it's uncontrolled airport, so I would announce on the CATF what my intentions are, that I'm going to be in the pattern doing touch and goes runway 8. And landing lights on. And 1 notch of flaps. Don't want to run over those taxi lights. By the way, I'm using the KB Sim Gladiator joystick, which has a nice twist rudder, kind of the poor man's rudder pedals. All right, we're ready for takeoff. So, throttle, release the brake, deal with the P factor. And about 70, rotate. Try to keep it straight on the runway heading. Flaps 0. Come back on the RPM. 2500. 400. Begin my turn to crosswind. Watch my airspeed. Want to keep it about 80. And I'm waiting for that OBS needle to be straight across. Probably could have made a more aggressive turn. Again, that's why you do these touch and goes, this pattern work. Alright, at 1,000 feet, level off, come back a little bit on the power. Don't want to be going crazy here on the speed and the pattern. Alright, let's begin our downwind. Again, I'm watching that needle, my altitude, airspeed. I'm going to keep it about 1,000 feet, about 80. And when that needle is straight up and down, then I am in the exact going the exact opposite position, direction that I took off at. See where we are in relationship to the airport. About midfield. And when my left wing is opposite the touchdown zone, I can set up the airplane for my landing, which will be starting with flaps 1 notch. It's hard to tell with the trees in the way, but notch of flaps. Ease back on the power a little bit. Gotten off course a little bit too. Begin my descent, and when I'm 45 degrees from the end of the runway, then I will begin my base turn. Which is about now. Again, watching that rate of descent. It's tricky in a turn because you're going to lose altitude. And then want to straighten out at 90 degrees for my base leg. And the next big decision is, when do I turn final? And that's one of the hardest things to do in the sim. Knowing when to turn final. So I've got a hat key on my joystick to help me make those quick glances. And again, watching my rate of descent and my speed. So our VASI lights are red over white, and final notch of flaps. I want to come over the fence about 70, clear these trees. Of course, I doubt trees would actually be there at a real airport. So I forgot to make my prop fine again. Let it float. Flaps 1. Throttle. Rotate. Fly that runway heading. Watch the speed. Trying to stay over that runway. Flaps up. Prop 25. Begin my turn to crosswind. Come back a little bit on the throttle. I need to get a little bit more aggressive in my turn. 10-degree turn is not going to make a very tight pattern. Coming back on the throttle a little bit, just about to 1,000 feet. Put the nose down. Ease back on the throttle a little bit. Okay, time for that downwind. Just pull back a little bit, a little back pressure in that turn. Keep my altitude. And when that needle's straight up and down, I should be good. Come back to 80 miles an hour, or 80 knots. Sorry, not in a car. So we're about midfield. Slipping a little bit on my altitude. All right, we're at the touchdown zone, so a notch of flaps. Ease back on the throttle just a tad. Begin our descent. And 45 degrees, we want to begin our turn. That looks about right. You know, if you do the same pattern a lot, there'll be landmarks on the ground that you can use to know when to make those turns. When I was learning to fly, we always had a checkered water tower at the end of the runway, or at the end of the pattern, I should say. Final notch of flaps. All right, let's begin that turn to final. Watching that rate of descent, speed. Overshot it a little bit, or undershot it a little bit. There we go. So red over white, and we're going to do a full stop this time. Pitch fine. Should be doing that probably sooner. And just bleed off some airspeed here. And we're going to taxi back on the runway to the ramp. Track those flaps. Landing lights off. Strobe off. Again, it's good to have some markers like using that OBS needle. All right, lights off here. Leave the beacon on. And mixture back. And finally, beacon, alternator, and battery. So, a great little challenge, pattern work, touch and goes, and a nice little bonanza. Let me know in the comments how you do. Until next time, spread wild.